Well, good morning, everybody. Well, we've made the turn. We've gotten past the winter solstice here for the Northern Hemisphere, and we're starting to see those daylight hours just slowly creep back up. Now, it's not going to make much of a difference for a while, other than maybe just a bit of a moral victory to start to see more sunlight each day, because we are in the throes of winter. And I've got big questions about the pattern that we've been in. And what I want to discuss today is this. For most of December, actually, once we really got past Thanksgiving, we watched a couple of big things happen. We saw high pressure build into the Bering Sea, high pressure at times building over Scandinavia. And these two things seem to be linked up. I'm curious if they're going to come back to being linked up, because in the stratosphere layer above us now, this has also been where we've seen the greatest kind of stratospheric warming event, pinching off two pieces of the polar vortex, one on the other side of the planet, more in Russia, and another one here over the Hudson Bay. We did see in this pattern, though, high pressure try to build off of the west coast. But interestingly enough, there has been a low tucked in between. Now, the deepest lows have been here, and then one there in the North Atlantic. But around this one, we've actually seen some really strong flow, and we've seen systems do this. All right. Now, my question is, does that pattern have repeatability? Does it have staying power? Can it come back? Because it is not here now. This is all since vanished. But I want to know if we'll ever get back to low-level flow that does this. So now you can see that low right there. There's another much deeper one here in the North Atlantic. But this is what's given us all of those clippers that have run across the country, and that's left a big void from California into the plains and at times into the southeast. We're just out of the flow. Now, as I said, we know that that's changed right now. We've replaced this high right here with much lower pressure. But I'm just curious, if we look at what this did to us in terms of precipitation this month, for the vast majority of this month so far, we've been very dry in that corridor. And you can extend this even a bit more into the northeast. And of course, Florida, pockets of Florida have been very dry. Our two big epicenters, though, have been here in parts of Southern California. Now, the Clipper track and the strongest onshore flow, Washington, and then coming right over the top here into parts of Montana, and then rolling through the northern plains. But as you can see, we're done with that in the near term. Get yourself oriented here. There's the West Coast United States, where we've been for the last 3 to 4 weeks with large areas of high pressure here. It's gone. Deep low is back into place. Strong flow coming into California. And we've seen, as a result of this, some tremendous moisture hitting Oregon into California just here in this past weekend. You can look at the last 72 hours of total accumulated precipitation. And really, that's been the main game in town. It's just been what's been targeting Northern California. Now, I don't want to ignore the Northeast, and this is going to be one of the trickiest areas to forecast going forward with this pattern over the next 2 weeks, because we've seen how mild we're expecting the air to be in the midsection of the country. But the question will be right in through this corridor where we talked last week about kind of the repeated shots at colder air coming through. I'm curious what we're doing in terms of snowpack into the Northeast as well. So just overall, where we are now, California's under widespread flood watches. We're expecting very strong onshore winds. There's high wind warnings that line the coast. Winter weather advisories going up the Cascades into the northern Rockies. A couple of pockets of winter storm warning. We do have a winter weather advisory here coming out of parts of Minnesota into Wisconsin. I'll come back to that in a few moments. And farther to the south, dense fog issues. Now, how long, this is the question we're trying to go after, how long does this continue? And do we see a return of some sort of west coast ridge like we saw for most of December as we go forward in this pattern? The answer is in the near term, no. I'm not going back to it in the near term. We've continued to see most of our models keeping much higher pressure in a couple of key areas. One there, one here, and then way up in the North Atlantic. Now, what this does is you can almost find maybe 2, maybe 3. Wow, that was terrible. 3 omega blocks setting up all from the North Pacific to the North Atlantic with the United States and Canada in between. And what that's going to do is that's going to keep some sort of kind of persistent flow coming into the west like this, running around a ridge. What I'm curious about when you look at this, though, is where does that colder air live? And can we get it repeatedly getting into this section of the country around what will be very mild conditions if you're farther to the central part of the United States towards the west and getting over toward the Front Range? That seems to be where we're stuck. And right now, most of the momentum in the atmosphere has started to shift north. And you can see it right here. I wonder how long this lasts. That's what we're going to try to answer in this forecast video, and then look as far into January as we can. Because for the next 2 weeks, The issue here is that some of these very dry places, which we just talked about, stay drier. The southeast goes back over drier. And I'm quite curious about that and what we could see in the northeast. This has been well discussed. We talked about this a lot over the last 2 weeks, just the return of very strong onshore flow to California. And as Matt's been pointing out, and we've kind of discussed multiple times, when you think about the water year in California, during winter, we really just need to see 3, maybe 4 events like this. And that's all it takes to completely revive the mountains, fill them up with snow, get the moisture back into place, and prepare for another, 10 months after this of what's the typical drier condition, especially as you get into summer. That's all it takes typically to get this, okay? Now around this, more snow here, but not much coming into the middle part of the United States. If we just look at total precip, in fact, most of the plains of the United States getting into the Midwest, very dry. We're not expecting any moisture at all in the next week or so, everywhere that you kind of see the white color here. The southeast is drier as well, but take a look at the northeast. And there is this chance for some substantial snows into this area as we go forward. But out west, I just want to zoom in and show you this. The WPC forecast continues to put up to 10 to 12, maybe 15 inches of liquid equivalent into the Sierra Nevada. Of course, a lot of this is going to be snow. And you could even see in the Central Valley, we're looking at several inches of rainfall, 2, 3, 4 inches possible. And then at the kind of down here, way far south, we could expect to see some significant moisture again. This is 5, 6, 7 inches of total moisture. Now, Yuma may be on the drier side of it, but the farther you get into the interior of Arizona, wetter conditions. You can see a lot of Nevada and Utah. There's going to be snow here in the Rockies, which is desperately needed so that we can continue to build up that snowpack on the Colorado River. But just look, the rain shadow effect of the mountains is pretty transparent here. I want to show you, again, I've been working on something new here, and I'm excited to release this. I just have to build all the other weather variables in and also get the ability to switch between models. I'm working on all that. But this is kind of new technique that we're working on. Will allow you to zoom, kind of see things. You can pan over and kind of hover and get the values. But I mean, I've got 3.1 inches coming into San Francisco here in the near term. Meanwhile, you come over to parts of Kansas. I mean, near Kansas City. By the way, I'm already out in the forecast nearly 2 weeks. I've got 0.04 of an inch of rainfall coming in here. But there is something important to see in this pattern. Let me take you back. This is about a 10-day forecast. Now you watch right in through here, one of our driest spots in the country since the beginning of December. And watch it start to slowly, see this? I got to talk to you folks in parts of Arkansas and Missouri and getting over to Kentucky, Tennessee, the Ohio Valley, because there is this chance, and you're seeing here in the operational European model, bringing in some moisture. But if you're in the Front Range, if you're in parts of, Nebraska, the Dakotas, Iowa, we're looking at very dry conditions overall for much of the next 2+ weeks. Okay, same thing for parts of the southeast. All right, so again, we'll be releasing this tool. This is on a test site I have, so this may not, if you like to copy my URLs, don't use this one. I'm going to change it, mess with it. I'm going to work on this a lot over the next few weeks. So just I wouldn't bookmark it yet. We'll get it out to you very soon. But I want to come back to that snow discussion because we are expecting the potential for we're talking at least 40 inches of snow throughout much of the central and northern Sierra, which we looked at last week. We know that we're in deficit here, so this is good. The Cascades in Oregon and Washington expecting quite a bit more. Then you can see, look, we have some snow, coming in through here, through the Rockies. But if you blow this out and just look at the rest of the U.S. and getting a little bit into Canada, the really big spot outside of this is just going to be here in Ontario, coming off of like northern Wisconsin, getting into Lake Superior, and then the Northeast. Now, this is going to be the wild card right here. I'm going to show you what we're looking for there in just a few moments. But back to where I began this narrative, I'm talking about this, okay? I want to know, do we find ourselves back in this temperature pattern in January? We're blowing out of it in the near term, okay? We're going to cool things off in the west, major warm-ups coming through here. This is the corridor, though. This is the corridor right through here that will likely see more repeated shots at cooler air. Maybe I can bend that down a bit more into the Ohio Valley. But this region right in through here is going to be seeing some significant warm-ups as we go forward. Now, we've already seen it, right? Just compared to yesterday morning, where you got temperatures that are 20, almost 30 degrees warmer than they were yesterday while we're cooling off parts of the Northeast. But what these surges of warm air have done over the last several days is has allowed us to kind of, melt a lot of that snow. And I was just looking yesterday at the satellite here. Big baroclinic leaf coming into the west. We'll talk more about that in a second. But I'm looking underneath this to see where the snow still is. And we still have some in Iowa. You can see throughout Iowa, northern Illinois, Wisconsin, parts of Minnesota. But outside of that, we've largely melted off all those huge snows we've seen since Thanksgiving. Now, just a word of encouragement. You see the shape of this line? In the next 6 months, it'll eventually look like that. And it takes us 3 months to get it to look like that. So we are working our way through winter toward the spring equinox, where we watch this line every day lose some of that slope and get more upright as time goes on. Okay, back to those temperatures. Here's today's forecast highs by the National Digital Forecast Database. And I'll tell you this, of all the models I've seen, they're the most aggressive on this warmth. You know, they've got in northern Nebraska, southern South Dakota, 70s today, 78 in Amarillo. Very, very mild conditions. And I just want to ask you to do something. Don't let these very, very warm anomalies bleed beyond this. We're still cool, you know, in these areas. It's just warmer than what we typically get for late December. So there's tomorrow, the 23rd. I mean, look up the Red River for 14 degrees as a high on a Tuesday. And then this is Wednesday, Christmas Eve, 71 in St. Louis, Columbia 74. There's what we think the Christmas will look like. You know, there could be a 10 degree, 15 degree swing from central to northern Illinois, just as one example here. But very, very mild conditions on Christmas, unless you're in the northern tier, way up north here, or in the northeast, or in the west, where we're expecting a huge winter storm system to be coming through. Then we have Friday, December 26th, and then Saturday. Look at this cold air trying to return. See, it's very, the map, sometimes our eyes just get drawn to the big bullseyes, and we kind of miss some of the bigger things by Sunday. I mean, look at the cold air coming back into the upper Midwest by Sunday. So it's very mild for a stretch, and then we return to this. But I want to know if this up-down nature continues much beyond that. So I do want to show you the 5-day sliding average. I'm going to go to the European ensemble for this. That's the next 5 days. And here's day 5 through 10. And if you notice after that, you see we start to open, you know, this corridor back up. Yeah, I mean, that's the reason I bring this up is because if we go back into that, we've seen that, right? We've seen some flavor of that. That's this corridor opening back up to cooler shots of air and mild here. And so there is something to this possible return to this pattern as we go forward, because it just seems as though we've anchored so much of our colder air here, and its outlet channel is in this direction. You know, I could make a lot of just arguments around why I think this is the case. But what it's probably going to do through the beginning of January is it's going to pulse. Just like this, you have a big warm-up that comes through here and then an Arctic shock, then a big warm-up that comes through here and an Arctic shock. Where we tend to maintain the warmth is there, where we tend to have the volatility is here. And I think that there's a lot to be said for that, and I'm going to show you a couple of analog years in a few moments that I think support that idea. So that's it. That's, I think, where we've landed in this pattern as we work our way through the first week of January. It is the middle of January that I think we're going to see much, much more of this be returned. I'm missing one component, though. There's one big thing about this that if it came into fruition, I would be really, very much on the wagon of here, telling you just watch out in this area for more Arctic invasions as we get into mid-January. And I'll show you what that is in just a second. Okay, we need to get some details on this pattern. First thing I want to do is I want to play for you the high-res NAM, looking for some stronger winds. We saw some huge fires, of course, last week. Strong winds coming through parts of Wyoming here in the day today. But outside of that, unlike a week ago or last week, the area over which the strong winds are hitting is much smaller. But take a look at what's coming through. Watch this. Watch the West Coast. That's Tuesday into Wednesday. Here we go. And these winds coming up the West Coast by the time we work our way into midday Wednesday are going to be quite strong. And this, of course, is a major, major travel day. And so these are also some of our huge airports running up the West Coast that could see some very inclement weather that could be quite problematic for travel if you're going to be traveling right around the holiday. That's winds. Let's talk about precip next. Okay, let's get this queued up for this morning. There we go. We're just going to play it forward. And as we work our way into this evening, getting out there to early in the morning tomorrow, look, snow moving into the northeast, rain farther to the west of that where there's more mild air. California, keep an eye on California. Watch the moisture just pull into the west coast the farther we push into Wednesday into Thursday. Look at that. Look at that huge low running up the coast. Now again, when are we in time? This is this Wednesday morning. Large winter storm system rolling up the west coast. But it's not to ignore the one that's leaving the northeast. And some of the snows into the interior of the northeast leading up to the day before Christmas, Christmas Eve. If we just kind of get a good look at these here. All right. So we're talking the chances in the interior parts of New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, picking up, well over 5, 6, 7 inches of snow. We'll look at the probabilities in a moment here. But the biggest snows are going to start to line up the farther we go toward the end of the month, right into parts of the Sierra Nevada mountains. All right. Now, to see these storm systems beyond the next 60 hours, which is all the farther the NAM goes out, let's compare the GFS and the European. All right, we've seen here. Okay, look. Got it in both models on the 23rd, getting into the 24th. There's our large storm system going up the west coast on Christmas Eve, and it just continues. That's Christmas Day. Look at that. Christmas Day there. Now, what will be interesting is this boundary right here on rain and snow on Friday the 26th. And there seems to be some risk in the middle of getting caught into some ice. We're going to have to watch that very carefully in this area, but could be very heavy snows the farther north you go, like for example in the UP or around the Great Lakes, the northern Great Lakes. And that storm system slides east, and the models have a different solution for it, all based on the positional strength of this high pressure here versus there. See what the difference is here versus here, and that's what's going to change the precipitation on Friday getting into Saturday for the Northeast. Now, as we work our way into early next week, some of the models, the European especially, is really trying to go after bigger snows in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and the GFS doesn't have it. See the difference here? And that's just out there on late Saturday night, early Sunday morning. And behind this, there is going to be a significant shot at colder air coming in through this corridor, but a rebound already of mild conditions back in the central U.S., despite this front clearing the East Coast. But there is something in the Northeast there. Look at that. On Monday the 29th, getting into Tuesday the 30th. But the farther out we go in this forecast, we just kind of return more moisture to the west. And the GFS has caught my attention for week 2. I'm going to show you why in just a moment, okay? Okay, some probabilities. Who's drier for the next 10 days? This is the European ensemble. Chance at staying under 1/10 of an inch of total accumulated precip. So it's southeast and most of the plains. In fact, if I blow this up to a 1/2 inch, that's the probability of receiving less than a 1/2 inch of total liquid equivalent. So you can melt the snow down, and that's what you'd get. So our wide areas on this are our wetter regions. And if we just kind of look at who's got a chance at going over an inch, over 2 inches, over 4. Did you see that? Let's go back to 2. Interior parts of the Northeast, and then most of California. We go up to 4 inches, 8. Now you can see those high liquid equivalents here in the mountains. And on the snowy side of it, through the next 10 days, which of course gets us to January 1st, this is the probability of getting an inch, another inch. We're just kind of looking generally at the areas. Now let's find those heavier corridors. That's 3 inches, and let's go to 6. So watch right through here, especially into this region, and then into the interior of the Northeast. And then now we're back to our Western Mountain discussion. But the probability of getting over a foot, take a look, New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, and then right through this part of Ontario, the UP of Michigan, Lake Superior. And if you come out west, we can just keep taking these numbers up. There's 18-inch probability, 24-inch probability, 36, 48. And yeah, we're looking at huge snows in this area. All right. Okay, from there, this is January 2nd. So I just took you to January 1st. Let's go to January 2nd. I still see some of the same old issues. There is a high over low block there, helping to keep the trough reinforced here. But the flow seems to be a bit more zonal maybe at this time. I don't know. Possibly. And why I bring that up is because our models, look at the CPC. It's going wetter into the interior of the U.S. where it's been so dry. Now, the European doesn't have it. The AI has something, but look at the GFS. I should just look at the GFS closer. It is attempting to start to open up this very dry corridor to some moisture. We're going to have to watch to see if that happens. The longest holdout is going to be the southeast, I think, on the driest weather. But the GFS out there at that same time period, January 2nd, see how it's got a little bit more of a trough, something a bit more here. It's pushed this block farther to the west. And I think that just could open us up for more chances of getting storm systems through the middle section of the country. So I want you to see what we're looking at. You see, remember what it takes. We've got to get some sense of southwest flow in this area to really open up the plains to get the moisture back into place. And I'm worried about it, but I'm also hopeful for it. What I'm worried about is this. On January 1st, where's the momentum in the North Pacific? It's just the best jet stream flow is way over here. There's no extension on the jet. It's just dead in this area. Now, that's very characteristic of a La Nina, by the way. We play it beyond that, and I do see something by the second, third of January. Can you almost see this look? Now, it's not strong momentum, but there's something coming in this direction as we get out there. And again, it'll probably be a part of one of those big warm-ups, then an Arctic shot behind it, a warm-up, then Arctic shot behind it. But this is very, very much La Nina. Now, if you say, what's El Nino? Take all of this and have it come screaming out of the subtropics, coming off of Hawaii, just slamming into the West Coast. We're just not seeing that. That's it. Look at the lack of momentum in the North Pacific and even North Atlantic. And it's just all here from the Sahara all the way around through Russia, China, Japan. That's where your motion is. That's the best flow in the atmosphere. So thinking that through, I have to go look at the new CPC forecast, and I'd like to make a couple modifications if you don't mind, okay? I do think that this is here. I think this is quite mild in this area. I would just extend the risk of colder in through here, just based off of what I've already seen the pattern capable of doing, and we've got some links to this. Yes, that would keep the Pacific Northwest wetter, but I would have to say that maybe toward mid-January, this could possibly go over more drier in these areas. I think we could get ourselves away from the dry risk here, but that takes a big if. I mean, really, we just have to get the flow accelerating into this area. But that's just a couple of things I'm thinking about out that far. I'll take note that the new European outlook from today, the 22nd through January 22nd. Now remember, it's heavily biased toward the near term, which is why you see so much wetness here, dryness in the south, southeast. But if you take this out, let's just take it out, look at the entire month of January. Did you see that? Like, there is something going on in this corridor starting to light things up. And you see how we're getting a little drier signal down here? That seems to be maybe a possibility on where this is going. Now, I've been watching this. I've been looking carefully at a few things. Okay, let me take you out to a Northern Hemisphere view. And I'm just curious if I could show you the upper air heights real quick here. What I really want to watch by mid-January, let's just leave it right there, is I want to know, does this ridge link up with some sort of ridge here, and we kind of get that linkage between these two, which allows this cold air to start to find itself in a channel in that direction. If you look at that 540 line, the thick blue one, you do note that it is dipping here. It is not building up into a large ridge, which means I think we're going to be safer saying that these folks are warm. We're going to be quite cold in through here, and that cold air is going to leak out at times into this region. I think that's what's going to be the case. The coldest air from here is going to have a corridor which to run through. And if we come back and just look at the United States again and look at the temperature pattern, kind of a 7-day sliding window, you start to see in mid-January, toward the end of it, the model's doing that. You see it kind of drop some of the warmth here, open this corridor back up. And I think this is too cold biased. The model just tends to do that. So I would say a lot of this is going to be a bit more mild, possibly. Okay, but this seems to open back up. Now, I'm looking for support in that. And you know, I've loved these diagrams this winter. What we're seeing is, for the next couple of weeks, deeper troughs that are where? Here in the flow. Okay, there's a ridge here. That's this guy right in there. And there's a trough just off the coast. Sorry if my drawings are a little ugly here. But I start to see some sort of, look at that. Do you see how they all kind of retrograde back to the west with time? And that's what I think opens up this channel for more shots at colder air. Certainly keeps a lot of this area here mild, though, as you go forward in the forecast. Now, a little while ago, I was kind of hinting at something that I think could really promote a return to that other pattern. And here's one of the things. We just saw in the new kind of outlook of the MJO, something like this at the very end of the month returning. Where is that? I mean, we're just talking about moisture, or not moisture, excuse me. Well, moisture, yes, but convection returning to the Indian Ocean. See it? See it right there. That's what we're talking about. There's not a strong signal with this. A couple of the models are doing something fun, like the newest forecast of the MJO from the Bureau of Meteorology out of Australia says, all right, you're in phase 8 now. Watch this. Swing it through fast in January. Just real fast like this. It's the only model doing that right now. But it at least opens up this opportunity for the atmosphere to return, to go back to repeat as to what it did in December, right? You got to get over here by mid-January for that to occur. And some of the models are doing that. What would really help this whole pattern out, and this is the real link, is that we've had this weakened polar vortex for weeks. It's expected in the beginning of January to strengthen and then just stay up here. What if by mid-January it does come back down? That would be your signal to return back to, I don't know where I put that map, where it was there. That's what would give us something like this going into the future. Now, I've got a couple of years that I'm thinking about. I'm going to bring up my current ocean temperatures. All right, see the current ocean temperatures here? I'm thinking about 2009, although 2009 was much colder in this area. And I'm thinking hard about 2018. 2018 in early January looks very much like where we are now. See that? That's a pretty close match. I bring this up because when you look at 2009 and 2018, which are just two of the analogs I'm thinking about, look, we found this again. So I don't know. It's just a thought. Now, certainly it's not the thought for now. Can I just write this on here? Look, I'm talking about mid-January return, not today. You saw what's going on in the next week. We're just hitting this area with very, very warm conditions, and the west is cooling off. Big winter storms are going up the west. I'm beyond that. This is the January 2009, January 2018 composite map. What I don't see, though, this is odd. I don't fully see it doing this. I could be convinced that we would go back over drier after we get into the first week of January in California. But I don't know why this area would show up drier. I would be more worried about here, but not this. I would expect this area to start to see more routine storm systems coming through. All right. Now, that's my outlook. I spent a lot of time this weekend thinking this through, and I think we're going to have to just consider the fact that maybe these two analog years are a part of it. What would make me wrong? What would make me wrong is simply this. Where was that darn graphic? There you go. What would make me wrong is if these blocks have more staying power and are just so persistent that instead of this being a second week of January issue where it all breaks down, we just keep this monster and this monster around. That will be the failure point. The MJO doesn't make the moves. The polar vortex does not return to a weakened state. That would be where we'd screw this up. And we just see this continue, and then the West Coast does not get out of the flow, and instead it just stays wet. But the momentum of the atmosphere hasn't dropped off enough to make me worry about that yet. If it did more, boy, we're in trouble. We're stuck. But I think we're going to get a pattern like this for the next, through the end of this year into the beginning of January, and I think it breaks. Okay, let's switch gears and go to another hemisphere. I'm going to take you down. It's one of my favorite websites, worldagweather.com. I've chosen Brazil and their soybean producing area and looked at the last 60 days. We've had some comments about maybe how good the Brazilian crop looks like. Every major warm-up they've had has been followed by a drop. So look at this. So there's just been a seesaw effect, a sawtooth effect, if you will, on their temperatures as they're not fully into their summer weather. If we look at the 15-day forecast on temperatures, that was a precipitation. Here it is. Look, we're doing it again. Warm-up, drop. So what I'm saying here is we're not seeing long enough duration excessive heat to start to cause a problem. If you look at the precipitation, let's now do that over the last 60 days. Yeah, a lot of Brazil is been drier. It was drier in November. But look, you see the slope of that line? It matches their historic slope, which means we've had more routine rains across a lot of Brazil's soybean growing areas since we got to the month of December. You can pick and choose your spots like Mato Grosso, big surge of moisture throughout December. Paraná, looking really good. Rio Grande do Sul, that's one that's a little bit drier. Goiás is one of our driest spots, even though there was a big surge of early December moisture. It's quite dry. But we can just kind of walk through these areas and see how things are shaping up. All right. The 15-day forecast on precip, let's just go back to national view of Brazil. Just take note, if this is average, most of the ensemble members are pretty close to it. But I want to show you some of the details in this because, for example, if you go to one spot like Goiás, it's much drier, whereas Mato Grosso is much closer to average. What are we talking about? Well, it's this. For the next 10 days, that's Goiás. That's a big producing state. They need to have the moisture. Mato Grosso, well, we're kind of drier east, wetter west, but we're splitting it. This region going over drier, they've had decent moisture lately, especially Mato Grosso do Sul, Sao Paulo into Paraná. By far the wettest conditions here in Paraguay, northern Argentina, and then getting over here toward Rio Grande do Sul. I do want to know how sharp of a divide that is, because Buenos Aires is forecast dry. Even over toward Cordoba is a bit drier too. So this could just continue to be something to monitor, but I've not seen anything yet in the forecast that just makes me want to scream out, there's an issue, better watch it, better watch it. I think the issue here is that the crop might be doing well, okay? Because look at this. Just like the U.S. is going through flip-flops, that's 10 days. That's week 2. See the moisture coming back into this area? So let's monitor it carefully and just consider what these next couple of weeks could do for South America. All right, I appreciate your extra attention this morning. Have a good week, and we'll just talk again tomorrow. Matt, I'll pick it up for you, all right? Thanks.